Dear viewers, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum and a very good evening to you all. Welcome to our show, Scholar Talk on the PhD viva voce, What to Expect with Associate Professor Dr. Nurul Shahnaz, who is currently heading the Department of Finance and Banking, Faculty of Business and Accountancy, University of Malaya, Malaysia. Ladies and gentlemen, she obtained her PhD from the Nottingham University Business School, United Kingdom. Dr. Shahnaz received her Bachelor's of Business Administration from Ohio University, United States of America. Her research area includes risk management and insurance, saving behavior and financial attitude of households. She has over 30 publications, includes books, chapters in books, and journal articles. She has served as an internal and external examiner for over 10 PhD theses, both locally and internationally. And five PhD students have graduated under her supervision. On top of that, ladies and gentlemen, as head of department, she has sat on the board of examiners for numerous PhD students with the department. So on that note, we are very delighted to welcome Dr. Shahnaz on our show tonight. Dr. Shahnaz, welcome to our show.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Dr. Mahfuz, for inviting me today. Yeah, I think we haven't met in a while also, and I haven't been on this live show of yours for a while. So thank you so much. It's good to see you.
Thank you very much for being on air with us. Ladies and gentlemen, so in the next 1 hour, she will be sharing her experience from the PhD examination. So let's get started with the first question to Dr. Shahnaz. So by and large, Dr. Shahnaz, how is a PhD assessed?
Okay. So, how is a PhD assessed? I think we need to first understand what is a PhD, right? A PhD is the highest ever, the highest level of academic attainment that one can achieve, okay? But what sets it apart from other types of degrees is that it is in the form of a research that is undertaken over a 3 to 4 year period, yeah. It's independent research, yeah, with the guidance of supervisors. So, and it has to be original research, okay, conducted by the PhD candidate, one that is strongly grounded in theory, with certain contribution to knowledge in the area of research. So, at the end of the PhD, yeah, you conquered the doctor title right in front of your name. So when you have that doctor title, you are the expert in that area. So so I mentioned that a PhD thesis, that I think one of the most important things is to have the contribution of knowledge. And I remember when I was first doing my PhD, I think that was the most difficult part. How do you find a contribution, right? How do you, have a good contribution to knowledge? And to have a good contribution in knowledge, you need to know what are the research gaps, right? So a research gap is something that is not there. It's a gap, it's void. So how do you find that gap? So the gap is found by reading other people's research to see what they have done, and have a proper synthesis of the literature, the past research that has been done, okay, what has been done. So by knowing what has been done, you try to find the gap. So that is the most difficult part, of doing a thesis. So definitely that would be one of the main elements, very important in a PhD thesis, to find that particular knowledge gap and to contribute, because we want to contribute to the literature in that particular area of study, that we have chosen. Okay, so once we have found that research gap, then as a PhD candidate, we undertake the original research work. So when we conduct the research, over a 3 to 4 year period, we come up with this dissertation. So the dissertation, as we know all the elements of a dissertation. It would have, the introduction chapter, that I would say is one of the most important chapters of a PhD thesis. it sets the stage, yeah, as to why is your study worthy, yeah. It sets the problem statement, the motivation of study, and the research contribution, yeah. So I would say having that the introduction chapter is very important, okay. And the second most important chapter, I would say, I think, is the methodology chapter, you know, where you have your research framework, yeah, the context of your study, data, you would explain your data, you know, how you analyze the data, you know, through robust data analysis, yeah, and then reporting the results. So that the methodology chapter is also another very important chapter. And I think, as in my experience of examining thesis, okay, I mean, I wouldn't say that I have very vast knowledge as an examiner. I have some knowledge, yeah, still, you know, still very shallow, but, you know, I have read or examined around 10 over theses. And I would say, you know, what could break a thesis, meaning that that means a negative outcome, that means failure, is that when the methodology part that was not done correctly. You know, other parts, I think it still can be forgivable, like it can be improved, you know, through certain corrections. But when the methodology is wrong, that is where you have to, for example, recollect data and reanalyze. So that is what we don't want, you know. So that the methodology section has to be really clear and robust, you know, and free of errors, okay. I think maybe the third part, you know, in the PhD thesis is about the literature, a synthesis of literature. So you need not only to report what other people have done, yeah, but you need to have very strong foundation in knowing the literature, you know, who are the main scholars in your area, what are the main research papers in your area, yeah. What are the debates in the literature? Yeah, what are the debates? Because scholars, you know, as you know, scholars have different schools of thoughts or different opinions on certain things. There will surely be some debates in the literature. So you need to know those debates, and you need to know where you stand, yeah, and where your study fits in. Okay, so you know, knowing that literature, I think that the literature, another important element, okay. And okay, the discussion of the results, yeah, after you do your analysis, you have to report the results and discuss them. So you know, you must need to know how to interpret the data, right? So that is also important. And last but not least, a PhD thesis will also have the component of the last chapter, the conclusion, where it has the implications to research, you know, to research, to practice, to policymakers, and to society, for example. So that chapter, although it is the last chapter, it would answer the question of so what. Okay, so in PhD we always say so what. You've conducted this research over 3 to 4 years. You've got certain findings. So you found, you know, whatever that you study. So you have some findings. So what, you know? So you have to justify how to bring back, okay, the findings to have some practical implications as well. Okay, so I think that is, you know, in general, you know, how a PhD thesis is assessed, you know, from the components of the thesis. So yeah, so we can go further, you know, and talk about the viva and all that as well.
Right. Doctor, when it
Yeah.
comes to PhD journey, definitely, no doubt, is a very tough journey. So we complete the journey in 3 years, or some of us finish in 3.5 years or 4 years. Then when we complete the drop, we write the drop, then we submit for examination, especially this part of the world, in Malaysia, UK, and some other part, I think. I'm sure you know better. So when we submit for examination, and then we face the viva. So definitely, I think whatever we should be done from our own side, we do it. Then we just wait for the viva. So when it comes to viva, what are the, common questions, common viva questions that we can expect, or our PhD candidate can expect from during the viva? Yeah. How challenging is that?
Okay. Okay. So before I talk about maybe what are the questions that a candidate can expect, I think okay. So when the candidate, the PhD student completes a dissertation, right? Before sending it for examination, that piece of thesis, okay, you have to view it as that is the final thesis. That piece of work needs to be free from any errors as much as possible. Okay, so it means that it has to be proofread, so assuming everything has been done, in terms of contribution, everything is there, all the data analysis methodology, everything has been done, properly. So make it free from errors in terms of sending it for proofreading. So that would be the best, okay, the best of the best that piece of work that you send out. Because for examiners, when they read the thesis, they are given maybe 1 to 2 months to read the thesis, they would have already formed a decision on your thesis. So you want to give them the best piece of work. You need to justify everything clearly in the thesis. You have to justify every step of the way, so that this is to minimize any doubts or queries that the examiners may have, because you have explained it clearly in the thesis. So in the thesis, you would try to have to address any questions or doubts that the examiner has. Okay, and the examiners, of course, they are experts, but the way that you write the thesis, it has to be as though the reader doesn't know anything. Okay, so you have to justify step by step everything that you do in your thesis. And I remember my PhD supervisors, they always tell me that, the only people who are going to read your thesis from page 1 until the end, who are they except besides yourself? So it's the examiners, and of course your supervisors. So it is the examiners. So you have to make sure from page 1 until the end, okay, everything has to be free from error. So I think, okay, what to expect during a viva? I think different countries, different universities have different ways of conducting the viva. In Malaysia, in particularly, in University of Malaya, and basically other universities in Malaysia as well. I've sat in some of the viva. It's quite formal, okay, in terms that there will be a chairperson, a professor. There will be the head of department, and maybe Senate representative, and then there'll be the internal as well as the external examiners. So the way that it is conducted as well, also it depends on the chairperson. Sometimes the questions can be very general, like the chairperson will pass it on to the examiners, internal or external. So what are the questions that you have? And then they can go very generally. In some vivas that I've attended, they go chapter by chapter. Okay, chapter 1, okay, internal examiner, do you have, so what are your comments? So when they go chapter by chapter, they can actually go like page by page, so that can last like until 3 hours, that kind of viva. I've sat in those kind of viva as well, chapter by chapter. Internal, please raise your questions, and then external, give your questions. So different ways that the viva can be held, general or specific, chapter by chapter, page by page. That could also happen. Like my experience, my PhD in the UK, I would say it was quite informal and relaxed. It was only me and the the examiners, my internal and external, and myself. Not even supervisors are allowed to be present. So just us, okay? So those are main differences in the style, okay, in the way that vivas are held. So okay, so what to expect? I think that it really depends on the examiner. You know, sometimes their questions can be very general, like, okay, what was the motivation of your study? Okay, why did you choose the context of Malaysia? Why did you choose the context of Bangladeshi, for example? Okay, so the context of study also, that one has to be justified very well. I remember when I was doing my PhD, so I'm a Malaysian, doing my PhD in the UK. My data was US data. So my supervisors, you know, they told me that you really have to justify the context of your data. You know, so that is another common question, you know, justifying the context of study. Okay, because you are from that country, that's not sufficient, yeah. So some examiners can be very general like that. Motivation. What is the contribution of your study? How is your study contributing to the literature? How does it add on? How is it different from so and so study? So those could be general. Specific would be like, okay, can you turn to page 101? Tell me what you mean by this sentence. Or, you know, refer to page 99 or whatever, refer to table 5.1. Tell me what this value means, as specific as that. So sometimes the examiners can give you this sort of, I just want to test you kind of questions. So I received that kind of questions as well in my during my viva. You know, interpret this number for me. You know, so we know that they're actually just testing. Okay, the viva is very important because it the examiners want to establish that you really, the PhD candidate, they did the work themselves and not getting someone else to run the data for them or get someone else to write the thesis for them. Okay, so this is what the viva voce is aiming to establish, okay, that the work is original and conducted by the candidate himself or herself. Yeah. So yeah, so generally, I mean, those are the things that you can expect during the viva. So yeah, what else?
Thank you, Doctor. So,
Mm.
Doctor, what we sometime, I mean, notice that since candidates, you know, they do their work by their own, and the examiners sometimes ad hoc ask question which is very provoking types. So it make us emotional, like, oh, how could we, we sometimes get emotional, like, and hyper when we
Yeah.
receive the question from the examiners, like, oh, this is not a contribution, it's nothing, you know, all those types of questions. So basically, when you want to answer the questions thrown by the examiners, what would be our approach? I mean, if you could share some of the tips that how should we, keep our approach or attitude toward answering the questions, including the limitations, presenting the limitations. Thank you.
Yeah. So I think examiners also come in many types of forms. You have some examiners who are, you know, very friendly type, you know, really set the stage, make you feel comfortable.
True, true.
And they usually start off with saying, oh, great piece of work. You know, we congratulate you for doing good work, you know. But sometimes actually that's just to set the stage and to make you less nervous. But actually they have loads of questions to ask you. Some other examiners, you know, they are, you know, more on the, you know, provoking and maybe aggressive style. I would say that, you know, I think one thing to avoid is being defensive or you know, like trying to argue with the examiner. Sometimes, you know, I understand that we all come from different cultures and backgrounds. So our attitude, how we speak, it differs, from culture to culture. Some cultures, maybe they don't mean to be, like aggressive and all that, but it seems that that's their culture. So you need to understand that the examiners are, could be from different cultures. So please always try to tone down, be respectful of the examiner. They are the experts. They are the ones determining whether you pass or fail. Okay, so be respectful and answer them, politely, confidently, but not rudely, politely but confidently, I would say. So you need to know your work well, you need to know your literature. So you should be able to give them a good answer with the knowledge that you have. So sometimes maybe they're just trying to provoke you, but they're just testing you. Okay, yeah.
That day I was reading, Prof, like just to share what I was reading one of the professor comment. He was
Uh-huh.
sharing that do not react, respond. So do not
Mm,
react, just respond the questions rather than reacting, like whatever they're
I
asking.
see.
So kind of one of the things that they were
Yeah,
sharing with this. Prof,
yeah,
one
that's
of,
true.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Go, please go ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean even among my students, I've had some quite a number of international students as well. So I always have to tell them over and over again, don't be defensive. From from one of the very first few students that I have, he tends to be quite defensive. So we always have to tone him down, and I think like he did quite all right during the viva, because from the proposal, defense, and everything, we already trained him not to be too defensive. Yeah, yeah.
The next question will be, Prof. I mean, we
Mm.
know that there is no perfect recipe for preparing for Viva, and every Viva is different. Yet, in general, I mean, how much we need to prepare for a Viva. I mean,
Okay, yeah. So definitely we need to prepare. That means that you need to. Okay, so usually when you submit your thesis, the examiners will take around maybe 2 months to read, and then after that to set the viva, it might take another month, for example. So after 3 months, sometimes we also forget what we wrote, right? After all, our thesis is a product of a 3-year journey. Sometimes we tend to forget. So I think to prepare well, you need to go through your thesis, from beginning to end, know it well, have the subsections numbered, and so that it's easy for you to refer to. Okay, recall back, okay, the steps that you did, for in your analysis, because questions may arise as to how you did or analyze certain things, so you have to recall back. You may also be questioned on why didn't you do it this way, why did you do it the way that you did, so you must also know uh, um, the other part. So another thing that you can prepare, right, besides reading your thesis well and all that, is you must know the limitations of your work, and you need to prepare what could be the possible questions. So when you know the limitations of your work, you can be better prepared that these might be the possible questions that would be asked. Certainly, I think we can predict. Sometimes we can sort of predict what kind of questions, because we know the limitations of our PhD can only encompass. It has its scope and limitations. So. Be prepared to answer, okay, on the limitations. Yeah. um, right, so I think maybe another way that students can prepare is to know the examiners. I'm sure you've heard this saying, is that you need to know your enemy well. So what are their strengths and what are their weakness? So if you know who your examiners are, get to know what is their expertise, what do they research on. So they tend to ask questions that, they are more familiar with. So if they're very strong in certain methodology areas, that could be something that, they might ask you on. Yeah, so be prepared in that sense. Yeah.
Doctor, the next thing that we would like to know from you is that how the viva, I mean, to what extent the viva can affect the outcome of the PhD. I mean, the decision. Can it change the decision from the examiners that we get from the report and all? To what extent it can affect?
Yeah. I would say that maybe 90% of the decision would have been made from reading the thesis, but the last 10% that is, it could be, a turn of events sometimes um, from a fail to a pass, or maybe the other way around. Okay, so there have been instances where from a fail to a pass. I mean, I sat in one of those vivas before. Basically, I think the problem was that the thesis was not sufficiently adequately written. The candidate failed to explain every step of the way. So many things were missing. He did not explain himself well. So just from reading the thesis, it was not of a passing level to that certain examiner. But after having the thesis, where the external examiner came, was present and asked the student certain questions on his doubts and everything, clearly the student could answer him very well. Okay, so it seems that in that case, that student actually, he knows the work very well. He knows what he's doing. He knows the area well, but it's just that to translate it into the thesis, that's where he was lacking in. Okay, so so I would say that he performed well in the viva. So the examiner changed the verdict from
The final
fail
decision.
to a pass. Yeah. So it actually changed. So I can also tell you another situation where from a pass to a fail. I think okay, the situation was that the student, so this one happened quite a number of years back. The student got re-examination. Yeah, so there are several outcomes, from the viva, is that you could have no corrections, minor corrections, major corrections, re-examination, or just a master's degree or a fail. So I think he got actually the external actually failed him, but the other examiners maybe gave something like a major or re-examination. So overall, he got a re-examination. So there are major parts of his thesis that needed to be worked on, reanalyzed. So that decision, so we had a reviva. It was quite disappointing that the student did not do the corrections that he was supposed to do. And I think that the work was submitted in in very hurriedly. Like he didn't take the 6 months or the 12 months. So it was done like really in a hurry. So a lot of things were not addressed. So in that instance, the external exam, so when those corrections are not done, you tend to annoy and maybe sometimes anger examiners, because we have given you suggestions on how to improve and yet you didn't do them. So you've given this chance and you did not take them. So that was an instance where the outcome was not good. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Doctor, oftentimes it has been said that a viva is about ensuring that the thesis is not plagiarized. I mean, or in other words, the thesis is being written by the candidates. So what would be your food for thought?
Oh yes. plagiarism, I think, is a major academic misconduct. Yeah, and we in academia, I think that is for us that would be one of the worst things that a researcher can do, which is to plagiarize. So actually, there are many forms of plagiarism. I mean, I'm not an expert in plagiarism, or we could take another hour or so to talk about plagiarism. But the easiest form of plagiarism is the verbatim plagiarism, where you just sort of copy and paste, from other people's work into your thesis. But I think now with the Turnitin software, I think students are more aware that of not doing this. But there are other forms of plagiarism, like what they call mosaic plagiarism, where you take from several sources and then combine them into one and seem to make it your own. But so as PhD candidates, I think you have to be aware that when you take other people's ideas and make it your own, that is a serious misconduct. So you need to cite the works of which your research was built upon. You have to acknowledge all the works that have been done previously, and that is where your study is building upon, right? So give credit to the people. Yeah. And I think I just came to know about this from one of my students. Apparently there's also what we call paraphrasing type of plagiarism. So this cannot be detected using Turnitin, because they are not copied word for word, but the ideas of others have been paraphrased to make it as though it was the candidate's own ideas. So sadly, there are apps out there that people can use or misuse, like paraphrasing. And the worst thing, I think, is that you can even pay people to to do some of this kind of work for you, which I think that is very unethical. So as PhD students, PhD candidates, this is a time where you are building grounds, how you what kind of researcher you want to become in the future. Basically, I suppose many of you want to become academicians, right? That's why you're doing your PhD. And you will be training others as well. So we want to, we hope that, PhD students, they by having high level of integrity, research integrity, in terms of avoiding all this plagiarism, citing the works properly, not manipulating any of your data, for example. That is another type of misconduct. Yeah. So avoid all these things, so be an ethical researcher. Yeah.
Right. Doctor, based on your experience sitting in vivas and also being an examiner, so whether having publications, if a student have publications, whether that helps to create an impression or whether that helps during viva, based on your experience?
Of course it in University of Malaya, for example, and I think maybe other universities as well, publication is one of the requirement, right? So when the student is able to publish their work, especially in good journals, it is an indication that their work is worthy. Is worthy. So definitely it will increase their credibility, the credibility of their work. Because if good journals can accept the work, that means there must be something good about the research. So definitely, it does contribute, to increasing the credibility of the thesis. Yeah.
Right. But Doctor, as we also know that being able to publish does not necessarily means the thesis is extremely well. Sometimes we notice
Yes.
that people do publish, but at the end of the day, they get re-examination, measure corrections, and all sort of things. So,
Yeah.
so I mean, what other things basically contribute them, to being like that? That's one. Second one is sometimes we hesitate to cite. If we see a
Ah,
closed paper like us, so for example, we are working in our thesis, suddenly we notice we're towards the end of our PhD and we notice there's a similar paper or maybe similar work. So we are afraid to cite those works sometimes, just assuming that nobody will notice this one.
okay.
So I mean, what we should do in that extent if we find some work, similar work towards the end of our
Okay.
journey?
Okay, so I'll answer the first question first, meaning you said that, although candidates have published, it doesn't mean that the PhD, is worthy. So just now I mentioned that yes, indeed, a publication, especially in good journals, would increase the credibility of the research. But on the other hand, it doesn't guarantee it, in the sense that, when you write a paper, a paper is very limited in the sense of the number of words that can be undertaken. So an article, a journal article, produced or published, is very brief. You don't justify every step of the way. You may not, cite everything. You may not cite all the theories, for example. So, you may not justify every step that you have undertaken in the methodology section or the analysis section. But a PhD has to do that. It's all about justifying, justifying, justifying. Why did you do this? Why didn't you do that? So it's all justifying, um, which you need to put in the thesis, which is not in the paper. Okay, so in I know we have this format, I think something like 3 essays or something like that, but it doesn't mean that the 3 essay format, you can just put in your paper publication, 3 paper publication into there. No, you need to still synthesize the whole thesis. It still needs to have a good motivation at the beginning. It needs to have a good contribution, and the flow from one essay to another. There must be some continuity, and it mustn't feel disjointed. So PhD thesis has to be very comprehensive, okay, as I mentioned earlier, okay. And so that hopefully answers the first question. So the second question is like, you are scared to cite a paper because maybe it was recently published and it appears to be in the same area that you have done, right? So I am sure that you can find differences in that paper to your thesis. Okay, it can't be an exact same of ideas. So I think it's best that you acknowledge it, especially, I mean, the new ones. Sometimes we might, we might, how to say, we are not aware of those studies, if they are very recent. But if they are, slightly older, like maybe 1 year ago, we still need to cite. And I think what students can do is to justify how their study differs from the one that has been published. So, but proper acknowledgement that would give, you would get, the examiners will know that you actually know the literature, okay, and how yours is different. Yeah.
Doctor, when it comes to contribution, the incremental contribution, we always, I mean, notice that many students, like even us, we confused. Is a very subjective term, contribution. To what extent, how much contribution would worth a PhD? Should it be like a theoretical contribution, mathematical contribution, maybe the contribution to the literature? I mean, to what extent we should contribute to assure that we might get a PhD or it worth PhD? If you have some
Right.
sharing.
Yeah, I think yeah, the contribution is definitely the most important part of a PhD thesis. Our contribution is not to have like some rocket science kind of big, huge contribution. An incremental contribution is sufficient. But I think to justify a good contribution, it needs to be motivated from a good problem statement. You know, what is the problem actually that that your research intends to solve, for example? Yeah, why are you conducting this study? Yeah, what is the problem that motivated the conduct of your study? So it's just a gap in the literature, and when you intend to fill that gap, is not sufficient. So finding a gap is one thing, but your problem statement, you know, it needs to be sufficiently motivated as well. So yeah, so a contribution, I would say, you know, is how you synthesize the literature. When you understand the you know, comprehensively the literature that has been done, know the weaknesses in the literature, you know, so you have to have a critical thinking, and then you must justify how your incremental contribution is actually worthy, you know, of a study. So yeah, it's very subjective, you know. But again, I also tell my students that a contextual contribution is not a PhD contribution, you know. So say if a study has been done in other parts of the world and you want to do it in Asia, for example, or a certain country, that there is not a sufficient contribution. Contribution has to be more than that, you know, the contextual. And you methodological contribution also, of course. But methodology contribution alone also not sufficient. So what you can have is maybe a combination of these types of contribution. You know, you could have one that is contextual, that would be maybe the last one, but first you need to have a contribution to knowledge, and then the methodological, you know, the way that you solve the problem is different from others. You're testing out another tool, and then maybe the contextual contribution.
Doctor, coming back to the viva outcome again,
Yeah.
you know, we get minor correction, some no correction, major resubmission, I mean re-examination, and fail and master's degree. So it comes to like major corrections. We heard the word major correction, and minor correction like 3 months, 6 months, and all. So as a candidate, when we receive this decision, so whether we should quickly correct and submit, or I mean, what we should be doing, how carefully and how should we handle this stage, because this is of course stressful because we are still getting corrections and we get
Yeah.
afraid of few things here. Thank you.
Yeah, I think of course any PhD candidate would want to have only minor corrections, I think,
True.
you know, but they also need to set in their mind for the worst as well. So I think as long as they get major or minor or major, I think that is already good. Actually, major correction means that, you know, you still pass, you know, subject to doing those corrections. So major, if I'm not mistaken, maybe requires some additional writing, or, you know, justification, or reorganizing the thesis. You know, it may require some minor reanalysis, for example. But I think for major analysis, reanalysis, that would come under re-examination, because sometimes when you reanalyze, you get totally different results. So it may require having to be re-examined. Okay, but I think even if a candidate gets major correction, that is good enough already, and they should be thankful. Yeah. Did that
Doctor,
answer
can
your
we
question?
yes, 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 yes. Doctor, can we take some questions from the floor?
Yeah.
Yeah, if I may take the first question from, I sorry, I can't. Prof, may I ask how long usually a viva
Okay.
will last? 3 hours, right? So what would
Um,
be your answer based on your experience?
3 hours is considered long. I think the standards of our faculty in University of Malaya, I think is, I mean, clear-cut cases, maybe 1.5 hours, maybe 1.5 to 2. That would be the maximum, 2 hours. If 3 hours, I think unlikely. But I have sat in such a viva, not in but in other Malaysian universities. That 3 hours is when I think there were 2 vivas that I sat. It actually lasted 3 hours. Is when the chairperson decides to go from chapter to chapter. That would take very long time. Yeah.
Right.
So,
Doctor,
yeah.
I mean, if I take another question, or second question.
Yeah. Oh, could a five. Oh,
So,
Sulaiman. Yeah, due to this pandemic situation, the way that the viva is conducted is also different from before. You know, last time, I think it's more scary last time when we have to have it face to face. And I think the viva is the scariest part of the PhD, because this is where you have to face, you know, your examiner face to face. When it's written, then it's not so scary, right? But when you have to face them, you know, physically, face to face, and not online, that is quite scary, you know, and intimidating at times. But now that it's done online, I think it should be easier. You know, you should be more comfortable. So online, due to pandemic, could it last 3 hours? Yes, I've sat in one by a local private university. Yeah, it was quite long. Almost 3 hours, almost. Yeah.
there's another related question. Sorry, no, this one. Which one is better, online or offline?
Emilia, okay. For me, I don't know. You can. What do you think? In my opinion, the online seems better in the sense that it's less intimidating. Yeah, it's less intimidating because you don't have that the examiner in front of you. You know, if face to face, it's a little bit more, you know, scary. I would say. Yeah. So, but you know, face to face is. I like face to face. If I'm an examiner, I like face to face. You know,
So there's
we get to
another,
see. Yeah,
yeah, there's
the
another
student.
question
Yeah.
about bit more. Five, Zulkifli. If the
Okay.
relationship of variables have been
Faisal.
tested in other literature, but not in business literature, does it counted as a good gap justification?
Okay, so you are testing certain variables in
That are
okay
tested
in
in other
business.
area, but if you
Okay,
test in
so
literature,
maybe in business literature you're looking at organization, behavior, you know, bully literature, maybe in education, maybe, yeah, among adolescents or something, is it? Okay, so I'm assuming it's that. So I believe that you can borrow the ideas of, you know, of those variables being from another field of study and bringing it, you know, into a different field of study. But of course, you need to have good justification, and I believe that you're not going to take all those variables, you know, just like that, a whole group of variables, and just test it. You might want to add in a few additional things, or maybe a moderating variable, or something like that. So don't take it, you know, just as a whole from another context, but, you know, try to have some modification to adapt to the business literature. Yeah, so you need to have good justification. Yeah,
before taking the next question, if I may ask another question, when it comes to failure, I mean, not minor correction, major correction is understood. Somehow we believe that will pass. But when it comes to re-examination or failure, so what are the basic reasons? I mean, what are the possible reasons that a student can fail or re-examinations based on your experience? Thank you.
Okay. Based on my experience, I think as I mentioned earlier, fail could mean a flawed methodology and analysis, because when the methodology is flawed, you have rubbish in and rubbish out, because you analyze something and it's wrong, so you churn out wrong results. So that means your discussion towards the end, everything is flawed. That could be a reason of failure.
Doctor, what do you mean by fraud? Is it inappropriate?
Fraud.
I mean,
Inappropriate, like wrong
wrong
methods
methodology.
conducted, yeah. Or sometimes the measurement was wrong as well.
Right.
Maybe it was not converted, it was not converted appropriately. For example, say, in finance, we have to log certain things, or, normalize certain measurements, and it
Right.
was not done. So I think that is one thing. And I also, some of the older cases that that I've sat through in Viva was that I think maybe the student was not guided properly. Yeah, that could be another reason, for whatever reason. Yeah, not guided properly by the supervisor. So that was a very old case that I came across, and the student had to actually failed lah. Yeah, I think in terms of failure, yeah, but re-examination means that we still give chance to the student to repair his or her work. So I wouldn't consider that as a fail. Yeah.
Right. How would be the plagiarism? How serious would be that? If something
Or
is found to be plagiarism, is just
plagiarism, yes, that could constitute a failure, because just like an exam, if you cheat, and after going through, after some investigation, and if it can be proven that this was a case of plagiarism, then of course the student can be failed, but of course after the proper investigation has been done. So so I think I want to tell the students to please avoid all these plagiarism issues. Yeah.
Doctor, what happens sometimes we notice that there is like an chicken egg types. Like they said, what about supervisors? Why didn't they catch them earlier? But I mean, being honest, how a supervisor would be knowing every single things that he been run, right? Or get from somewhere. So I think this would be, I mean, somehow will more goes to the students, right? Who write
Yeah.
the
Yeah, it can't be on the supervisor. Supervisor, to a certain extent, we trust that, we trust the student, that they are doing the right thing. But sometimes we may overlook, and we are not aware. So Turnitin report, it can give some indication, but as I said, that is only verbatim type of plagiarism, when you have certain words taken from other sources and you put it in. But as I mentioned, it doesn't catch the issue of taking other people's ideas and making it as your own. That cannot be detected from machine. And even supervisor, we are only human. We can't detect, sometimes we just can't detect all this. So it can't be on the fault of
right.
supervisors. But if good supervisors, would as an examiner or as a supervisor, I think we know if our student take other people's work when the thesis is not consistent from end to end. So you see some parts are very good, some parts are written very poorly. So you know that there's no consistency there. Yeah, it's very inconsistent. So in those cases, sometimes we also doubt, whether this good part is too good to be true, because other parts are grammatically flawed, for example, and this one is so excellent. So we know that there's something not right there.
Prof, we are towards the end of our show. We'll take another two questions. We have some more questions. From Jannatu Moni, Jannatu Nessa Moni, yeah. Said about some tips for online viva.
Tips for online viva, I think, have a good internet connection, and free from disturbances, have good lighting, so that actually, is, it builds up towards, having a good first impression, of yourself. And besides that, I think all the other things that I've mentioned, being prepared, have your thesis next to you, and with all the things marked and labeled, so that you can refer to it. Greet your examiners, by name, and how to say, the title, professor, and so on and so forth. Do not interrupt, when they are talking or asking a question. Let them finish. I think this sometimes our students, they are too eager to answer that sometimes before the examiner can ask, they try to barge in, by answering. So try to avoid that. Yeah. Do you have other questions? You're muted, Mahfuz.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, there's another question.
Okay.
For the Q&A.
How long for the presentation and for Q&A? Presentation usually is 20 minutes. Yeah, so don't make it too long, because, like, for example, in the board of examiners, not all of them will be in your area. So make the slides and the presentation as simple as possible so that everyone can understand. So the whole thing should be 20 minutes, because the presentation is actually just to show that, you did your work, what you are researching on. And it's not to show that, you did a lot of work, you want to show them everything. No, because the Q&A, that would, the examiners want the time for the Q&A. So the Q&A could take at least an hour or so. Yeah. So, yeah.
So I think I will take the last question for tonight. This is just one independent variable, but
Okay.
with some moderating variables.
Okay. All right. Sulaiman, it has to be the problem and all this relationship, it has to be grounded in theory. So, and past literature. So it cannot be just one independent variable and one dependent variable, because the model may not be strong enough. So it cannot be that your dependent variable is explained by only one independent variable. I think that could be, that's very dangerous, and your model may not be strong enough. Okay, so there should be more independent variables. So go back to the literature, look at the theory. Yeah, that would give you an idea, but this one is quite is questionable. Yeah, so go back to the theory and the literature.
Right, Doctor. So I think we have some other questions, but we wouldn't be able to take all the questions. So as a last question from my side, Doctor, when it comes to major revision or minor revision, when it comes to minor revision, who we report to? When we have a major corrections, how we correct and who we report to? If re-examination, who we report to or how we submit? I mean, if you have some, yeah.
Okay, if the student gets a minor revision, then only the supervisors will have to go through the corrections. Yeah, so only supervisors. If major corrections, then the internal examiner will have to go through the corrections and approve them. Yeah, so they have to approve. So if they don't approve it, then the student may not pass. If re-examination in UM is a 6 to 12 month verdict, yeah, you have 6 to 12 months to redo, whatever analysis that is required, yeah, and resubmit, and it will go to all the same examiners as before. So it will go back to the 3 examiners and be re-examined all together. So that is re-examination. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shahnaz, for sharing your valuable knowledge. I'm sure it would be very handy to the PhD candidates out there who are about to face their viva voce soon, inshallah. And with that note, ladies and gentlemen, we thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next the last week of this month. We'll have again another show. Until then, stay safe, stay blessed. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. Thank you, Dr. Shahnaz.
Thank you, Dr. Mahfuz. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.